This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
In this episode, I sit down with Drake, who at just 26 years old has already lived through the chaos of heavy drinking, ketamine, and cocaine use, facing obstacle after obstacle in his journey. But instead of letting his past define him, Jake transformed his struggles into purpose. Today, he's an addiction coach and cognitive hypnotherapist, using his own experience to guide functioning addicts towards change, helping them break free and reach the goals they once thought were out of reach. Let's get into it.
I'm Jake. I am from Portsmouth in the UK. I'm 26 years old and I'm an addiction coach and a cognitive hypnotherapist.
What is your sober date?
Wouldn't be able to tell you, mate. Probably February 2023 at some point. I don't really like to track it because I just find you counting the days, and that's kind of the old me. I feel like I personally don't need to track it myself. Yeah, sometime in February 2023.
Okay. I like the fact that you're not tracking it like a lot of people do. That's kind of refreshing. So I'll probably ask you more about that in a bit. But so what was your drink or drug of choice?
Yeah, so it was cocaine, ketamine, cannabis, and alcohol sometimes. It wasn't really alcohol that often, to be honest. I always had the mentality of like, I don't want to wake up with a hangover, but I will go and do a gram of coke and a gram of ket. So it didn't really align. But yeah, it wasn't really alcohol that much. It was mainly the coke and the ketamine, to be honest.
Okay. So can you give a little background of kind of how your use started, say when you were a teenager or something, and kind of how that kind of progressed into where you think it became a problem?
Sure. Yeah. So it all began, well, as most people do in school and stuff like that. I obviously used it kind of recreationally at parties, et cetera, et cetera. And then, yeah, it was smoking weed at school. I remember one time I was in the forest in school. We were all smoking a joint, and someone uploaded a video on social media, and the school head teacher ended up seeing it and ended up getting excluded from school for that. So it was one of those things where in school you kind of just dabbled with a bit here and there, a bit of weed and stuff like that. And everyone always said like weed was the gateway drug, and I never really truly believed it. And then that must have been probably 15, 16 years old, something like that. And then fast forward a couple of years, I was then going to football games and getting on the coke and drinking and stuff like that. Like kind of, so for anyone that follows football or soccer over in the States, I support Portsmouth, which is a team in England. And yeah, I'd go and follow them home and away. The away games specifically, I'd wake up at like kind of 5, 6 a.m. I'd get the coke in. I'd be kind of on the coach by 6, 7 a.m. drinking and sniffing and stuff. And then it was weekend after weekend. But then when something bad happened in my life, I'd then go and turn to it. When I was going out for food with my friends, I would find an excuse to go and use it. There was always an excuse to go and use it at every opportunity. And that's when I started to see like, right, this is potentially getting a bit of a problem here. And then it picked up a little bit. Instead of 1, 2 times a week, it was 3, 4, 5. Like I remember one time in my life when I was doing carpentry a few years back, I'd work the next day at 7 a.m. I think it was. And I was in my mate's kitchen at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, charging my batteries for work whilst sniffing coke. And yeah, it just slowly, gradually started to pick up more and more. But it stemmed specifically from a breakup that I had. And after the breakup, instead of processing it and sitting with myself and being by myself and really kind of healing, I went down the other route and just avoided it at all costs for quite a few years. So yeah, that's a kind of snippet of where it was. I don't know if you want to dive in a bit deeper into that before I move on, but yeah, that's a kind of rough overview, really.
Yeah, of course. I guess my next question would be, you mentioned some difficult things happening in your life. Do you mind going into kind of what an example of some difficult things that made your use increase over time? things that sort of triggered you to use more?
I mean, there was a breakup, obviously, which definitely fueled it. That's where it all kind of started. And then after that, I had a friend that committed suicide, and that was due to drugs too. And we all, instead of knocking it all on the head, it all got worse, and we all started kind of drowning our sorrows in the drugs to kind of forget about the pain that caused. And there was just the standard kind of like life challenges that it throws at you. You know, if I'm looking back at it now, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I reckon I disliked my life, to be honest. I experienced a lot of discomfort day to day in the life that I was living, in the job that I was working in the in the job that I was working and the life that I was living. It wasn't quite aligning with the direction in which I wanted to go. But instead of facing it and tackling it head on, I was avoiding it through the drugs and the substances, you know. So yeah, there's a couple of life events that kind of came up for me. It wasn't necessarily like huge life-changing traumatic events that changed my life, but it's these lower T trauma events that I like to call them that just kind of nudged me further and further and further down that line.
Do you mind describing, say you can think back at some of the really rough nights, rough mornings. Can you describe like a 24-hour period in that time period of waking up in the morning, what your use was like? Was it primarily like in the nighttime when you were with people, or were you waking up and using and kind of getting through the day?
Yeah. I mean, back when I was at my worst of probably 4 years ago, maybe something like that. Yeah, it was a regular occurrence, like 3-4 times a week, maybe 5, where I was sniffing ketamine by myself. I was in the house alone using it, and then I would kind of go to sleep with it still in my bedside drawer. And then the first thing that would be in my mind as soon as I wake up would be that. And yeah, it was difficult. I mean, I experienced a lot of anxiety, a lot of sadness, a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, and a lot of frustration too. Like I wasn't quite sure of actually why this was happening. And we can get on to what I do in a bit, but this is why I do what I do now, because I help people understand like why this is happening. And that's what really struck me for so long. Like I was hitting this obstacle time after time after time. Like I didn't know why it was happening. And yeah, it was tough and it was lonely as well. No one knows kind of what you're going through really. And there's a lot of people like to hold a lot of stuff back in addiction, especially kind of making sure to look like you've got everything's together on the outside, but internally things can be a little bit off, you know. And that's when you kind of take your mask off at the end of the day when you come home and just have that sigh of relief and that breath of like, right, I can now go and do what I want to do and do what I've been thinking about doing all day.
So it would take a lot of use of whether it be ketamine, cocaine, or drinking to get to that level where you feel like you can function through the day.
No, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was using it all day every day, because that would be a lie. It was more of a when the working day was over, that's when I would then turn to the drink or the drugs to kind of unwind or switch off, so to speak. And yeah, I wasn't using it from the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed. It was more of a get through the day and then I'll use it. And that's the kind of people that I tend to work with too.
When it came to all three of those, which it sounds like it was mostly ketamine, cocaine, and alcohol, can you describe, say, at your worst, how much of each you'd be probably using through a bad day, regardless if it was morning, evening, night?
Well, I suppose with ketamine, I suppose it was maybe, I don't know, between 1.75 and 3.5 grams in a day at sometimes. With the coke, I suppose it was probably more. It can really depend. I mean, if I was out on a night out, it would probably be 3 halves, maybe a little bit more. At festivals, obviously, it can be more and stuff too. It does really vary, but I suppose if we're gonna kind of say it's going to be this, it was probably more. Yeah, between 1.75 and 3.5 grams of the ket, and probably maybe 3 halves or something on a night out, just up the pub.
Do they refer to 3.5 grams over here of cocaine is called an 8-ball? Is that
Yeah.
what they call it over there?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So I don't have much knowledge about ketamine. Can you describe sort of how accessible it is over there and what the effects are?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, super, super cheap. It's about £15 for, well, I don't know the prices nowadays, but what my clients say, it's about £15 for a 1.75, which is half an 8 ball. And yeah, it's essentially a horse tranquilizer. So there's a difference between an addiction and a dependency. An addiction is more of the uppers, is more of the cocaine, the stimulants, the alcohol. No, sorry, not the alcohol, the cocaine and stuff, which is kind of like the uppers. And then you've got dependencies, which is more like alcohol and ketamine and weed and stuff like that. And that's why they're the more kind of downers, so to speak. They're the kind of sedatives. They're the ones that kind of really help you log out and forget about the world. Yeah, it's more of a, if I'm going to compare it to something, it's probably going to be like cannabis, where it's a very like, kind of logs you out. It's a very dull, like low kind of mood, and it's just very it makes you sleepy, so to speak.
Definitely wouldn't consider it as
No.
an upper. It's more of a downer.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
I've never tried it. I mean, the only downers I've experienced are mainly, I guess marijuana always made me feel down and relaxed. Alcohol, never done any real painkillers or anything. But yeah, I've heard things about ketamine, and I don't know how popular it is over here in the States, but I'm gonna have to do a little more research on it because I find it interesting.
Mm.
How much do you think you were drinking, and what were you drinking? Was it hard alcohol, or was it beer, or what was?
I wasn't drinking that much, to be honest. Just like I said at the start, it was more so the drugs over the alcohol. If we're going to put a number on it, it was probably a few drinks a week. Like, it really wasn't a lot, to be completely honest.
So you'd say the drugs primarily were having the biggest impact on you. How are they affecting like your relationships with girlfriends or friends, family? How was that impacted by your use?
Yeah, obviously, as you know, and probably people that are listening too, is that obviously it does have an impact on you and your relationships. It was more so the relationship with myself, to be completely honest. I didn't have a partner at the time. Obviously, I was seeing people and stuff like that, but it was nothing serious, and it had a huge impact on my relationship with myself, because I lost my self-worth. I lost my love for myself. I lost the belief that I could actually turn it around. And it was a real hard period of my life. Away from my own journey and away from my own self-love, it was also affecting the household. I was living with my mum at the time, and obviously it was having a big impact on that relationship. And I never made real deep connections with people, because I was always kind of in this other reality. I was always kind of in this other dimension. And yeah, there was no real depth in relationships. And if I look back from then to now, like the depth of the conversations were a lot shallower at that time. The depth of connection and love and joy and stuff that I had with these people were also a lot lower too. So yeah, it mainly impacted my own relationship with myself, my family, and the friendships too.
Wow. Okay. So, are there any specific moments that you can think of, like looking back, that you find very regrettable, or things that you wish you could go back and change, or that you made sure that in your sobriety will not happen ever again?
I'm not going to say I want anything to change, because everything in the past has shaped me into who I am today. There's absolutely nothing that I would change from that chapter of my life, because lessons, experiences that you've learned from turn into wisdom, right? So I believe everyone experiences is something, obstacles and barriers in their life, but there's two ways you can look at it. There's a way of victimhood, like, why is this always me? Like, this shouldn't happen again. Like, bang, 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 just like resentment. Or there's the path of least resistance, where you can look at that obstacle and be like, cool, well, what can I learn from this? And there's definitely lots of learnings and lessons to take away from them.
I like that. That's a really good answer. The fact that you're using those as tools to make sure that you keep improving as a person.
Yeah, because otherwise, the sense of victimhood and the sense of why has this happened to me, and kind of all of that negative self-talk, it really doesn't help anyone in their journey. And if you are in the early days of recovery, and this victimhood mentality is just going to keep spinning you and spinning you and spinning you. This is why I don't like to put a date on my recovery, and this is why I don't like to call myself in recovery, and this is why I don't look back at the times and think, oh, why has it happened to me? Because that shaped me into who I am today. I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't have learned from those obstacles.
Of course. No, I know I'm happy. I would hope that we all can learn from everything and not just sit back and beat ourselves up and make ourselves feel more and more guilt about things, just as a way to actually learn and grow and become better in our sobriety. But are you comfortable going into just a little detail about kind of maybe some instances that were reminders that you needed to change at the time?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, it wasn't necessarily capital T trauma. It was more of the lower T trauma, right? So it was more of the impact that I had day to day, rather than I wrote a tree off. I wrote a car off into a tree or something like that, right? It wasn't anything that completely shook my world, but it was stuff that just pushed me and pushed me and pushed me and pushed me until I got to the point where enough was enough. So yeah, unfortunately, I've got no exciting stories to tell you that I don't know, I took over a plane or something like that, right? Like I've got nothing to share there. But it was more of the micro incidences rather than the macro, and it was more of the day to day for the few years that I was living, rather than some huge event that happened kind of in my journey. But yeah, I mean, if anyone's listening, I mean, not everyone's going to have a huge traumatic event that made them stop, right? Right. I feel like a lot more people are going to have instances where it's just this little thing that just nudges them, nudges them, nudges them, nudges them, nudges them. And maybe it's the discomfort they experience every day. Maybe it's the breakup that they have. Maybe it's the lack of financial abundance. Maybe it's the lack of mental clarity that they have. Like, whatever it is in the individual's world, no matter how big or small the obstacles are, it's so important to just use these as fuel to turn the ship around, rather than keep heading down that spiral. So yeah, in a long-winded answer, I don't necessarily have like this one thing that shook my world, but it was more of a micro lower T trauma rather than a macro big T trauma.
No, I like that answer a lot. It is definitely refreshing because a lot of guests on my show, including myself, there's a lot of like specific traumatic things, like me driving my car into an apartment building and stuff like that, getting arrested for DUI. There's always these different things, but like you said, the micro things that happen on a day-to-day basis in the midst of our addiction are just as significant when you add them up, where it just wears on you over time and you're like, okay, I think looking back, it's time to change, and so I like that answer. So do you mind going kind of into a little detail about what in the last, like, say 24 hours of sobriety, like what was going through your head kind of at the point where you're like, this is the last time I'm using, or I'm never using again? Like, how was that transition?
Yeah, so I literally remember the day that I stopped, and funnily enough, the reason why I do what I do today is because of the hypnotherapy that I had. And from the second session with my hypnotherapist, I haven't touched anything since, and it's been like 2.5 years. So the last 24 hours really were actually a bit of a positive for me, to be honest. Like I wasn't necessarily on it in those last 24 hours, and like I was like doing the last blast or whatever. It was more of a I think, let's say for example, I had my hypnotherapy session on a Tuesday, for example. I think maybe a few days before that I probably would have got on it. And I do remember my online fitness coach coming over from Dubai to the UK to do an in-person fitness event, and I remember going out the night before, and I was telling myself, right, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. And I didn't. And I ended up getting on it and staying in the kitchen till like 3, 4 a.m. And I missed the in-person meetup. And that was when I kind of knew, like, right, this is the last time that I'm doing it. And then it was nice because I had my hypnotherapy session a day or two later. And from then, that's when everything changed. And yeah, so the final 24 hours really weren't like me kind of hanging onto this bottle or onto this bag or anything. It was more of a gradual process of letting go and knowing, like, right, this is it. like I'm moving on. And this hypnotherapy session just really kind of put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. And yeah, it's stuck. It's stuck.
That's incredible. Long time ago, I'd say about 8, 9 years ago, I did a little hypnotherapy for my drinking, and I was new into sobriety. I had gone to the hospital, and I decided I'm going to try hypnotherapy because I had heard about it. And I think it worked a little bit. It didn't stop me from drinking forever, but it did. I could see the impact it had on me and how it went into a trance and started to change my way of thinking. So I found that very helpful. Is there anything you recall from your hypnotherapy sessions that stand out that you think may have had this dramatic impact on you?
Well, I'm a hypnotherapist. It's what I do day to day, right? So, I mean, do you want to talk
Yeah,
about
you're
my
more-
experience or the work that I do with my clients? Because I've got two answers to that, really.
Yeah, let's do both. I want to hear about your experience and what led to do what you're doing.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I can't actually remember like what we actually worked on in that session, but an addiction is simple. Like the addiction isn't the problem, it's a solution to the problem, right? The problem itself is actually the discomfort that one is trying to avoid. So it was only when I raised my level of awareness and understood like, right, I'm avoiding something here, like something needs to change for me to really tackle this addiction head on. And that's the work that I did with my hypnotherapist. Obviously, I worked through the breakup and the emotional content through that. There was some stuff from childhood, like lack of confidence, growing up through school that I unpacked too. So all of these cumulative kind of events kind of shaped my identity. And this identity needed to be escaped, so to speak, because when people say like, I only drink when I'm out in social situations, like that in itself is a problem, right? If maybe it's lack of confidence, maybe it's you feel like you don't fit in a group, maybe it's you are socially awkward, so you need to go and have a drink as a social lubricant, like whatever that is, that's the kind of work that a hypnotherapist can work through and process and really help you unpack. Because if you're using drink, for example, as a social lubricant, as a way of kind of relaxing or gaining some confidence, for example, then the common sense answer would be, well, if you can gain confidence internally, you're probably not going to have to reach externally for it, right? So there was part of me that wanted to fit in with these people. There was part of me that felt like I just couldn't go to the pub without being on it because I didn't know what to say or I didn't have much conversation or whatever. So that was one aspect. But then the other aspect was me being by myself and wanting to avoid the discomfort that I'd built in my life. So the hypnotherapy process with my hypnotherapist was obviously working through the emotional content and really unpacking like what went on throughout that breakup and throughout my childhood and stuff like that, and working through that. So I don't have this emotional backpack that I'm carrying around with me. I don't have to feel like I need to have a drink or a drug to kind of take that pressure off, right? So that's my answer for the personal story. So I don't know if you want to dive into that before I move into the other side.
Yeah, keep diving into that as much as you can, and then you feel free to transition into what you do.
Yeah, well, it's a similar process with my clients too, right? Like every client that comes to me, and it links nicely to the process that I went through, because every client that I work with has experienced some form of emotional discomfort, whether it's a breakup, whether it's lack of confidence, whether it's childhood abuse, like whatever it is in the individual situation, they are using drugs or alcohol or vapes or caffeine or whatever because they have a dysregulated nervous system, right? And this dysregulated nervous system is latching on to these addictive vices. That gives them something, right? So my question to someone whenever they're using addictive behaviors is like, what does this thing give you? It's so simple. Like it cuts through all of the noise from escaping to, escaping to stress relief, to unwind, to switch off.
Coping mechanisms.
Yeah. I mean, the coping mechanism is like the umbrella, and then the umbrella's got like lots of different subsections, right? So all of it is a coping mechanism, but then it breaks down into like stress, anxiety, overwhelm, like blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people experience some form of trauma in their life, whether it's big T or little t. And a lot of people hear the word trauma and they think it's like a 7-car pileup that happened when they were 5 years old, but it really doesn't have to be like that. Mine, for example, part of mine I don't mind sharing was I used to have a really bad stutter in school. So I used to have to stand up in school and read books and stuff, and I never used to like it. So I had really, really low confidence. And I also partnered with bad skin, essentially. That also didn't help either. So both of these things both added to my low confidence. So I then turned to drink and drugs in social situations to help kind of alleviate that discomfort. So look, it can be different for everyone, and every single client is different. Like no one client is the same as the other. So that's a tough answer for me to give. But in a nutshell, it's avoiding some form of discomfort. And my job as a hypnotherapist is to unpack the discomfort and understand what is this discomfort that one is trying to avoid, and how can we heal that discomfort so you don't have to turn to these external vices. And it's all through the first phase, which is the subconscious reprogramming system, because the subconscious mind controls 95% of our behaviors, right? And whenever someone experiences an urge or a trigger, it's simply something you've experienced in the past that you're experiencing today. And like Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life and you'll call it fate. So my job is to help raise someone's level of awareness and making the unconscious conscious, so they can kind of hit pause just before there's something called stimulus and response, right? Stimulus is kind of the discomfort that someone experiences, like the overwhelm or the anxiety or whatever. And then the response would be to go and get the drugs or the drink. The magic lies in this middle part where they experience the stimulus, but they don't get the response. And that's, if they can stay in this middle part and reflect and really understand like why, that's when the addiction or the addictive chain breaks.
Wow, that's really interesting. And how long have you been working with people now, as far as like through hypnosis and other counseling, forms of counseling?
Yeah, so it's very different to counseling. I definitely wouldn't label myself as a counselor, but yeah, about 2 years now.
Okay. And so you work with different clients of all different genders, ages, all different kinds of backgrounds. Is most of it related to using as far as drugs and alcohol, or is it just everybody?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily work with specific genders or anything like that. I work with guys, females, all different ages, all different demographics, all of that. But I do specifically work with certain psychographics, and the specific psychographics that I work with is high functioning addiction clients, right? So most of my clients have their shit together on the outside. They go to work every day. They've got a business. They're high performers. They're ambitious. They've got their shit together, right? They're in sales or they're in business development or something like that. I know when we spoke last week, you mentioned you're a trader. I've got a hedge fund manager and stuff too. So like these people do well in their career. Yeah. But then when they get home, that's when it all hits. They kind of take off this mask and they can kind of breathe, and then they have a beer to unwind, but then it turns into a bag of Coke, and then it turns into 5 beers. And then before they know it, they're doing it 2, 3, 4 times a week. And they tell themselves they use it as a reward. They tell themselves they use it to unwind. They tell themselves they have a racing mind, so they use alcohol to switch off or smoke a joint or whatever. So they're the kind of people that I work with, essentially ambitious individuals that have their shit together on the outside. They've got everything that they could want, like they've got a good job, a family and all of this, but they know deep down that something isn't right. And maybe they're having too many beers, or maybe they're doing too much Coke or whatever. And it's starting to have an impact on their family life, their work performance, their mental and emotional clarity and well-being. And it's starting to have an impact on their life, essentially.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned the idea of them coming home and taking off a mask. That is a subject I like to talk about every now and again, because In meetings and other people I talk to in recovery, it seems like a lot of us, including myself, really had this image looking okay, that people thought I had my life together perfectly, and when I would get home, I would peel off this mask and go into this depressed state and try to fill that void with alcohol and drugs. And most of the time, most people in my life wouldn't know it because I would get up the next day, go to work or go out and see people, and nobody would know that I was under the influence the night before, and it was something that you get really good at hiding. So is your goal in what you do is to help them not put that mask on anymore?
Yeah, well, it's essentially to not have the mask at all, right? Like when someone lives two lives, it can be very tiring, very, very tiring, emotionally, mentally, physically. Like it's exhausting, like living a fake life. Like I'm sure well, just like from your experience, right? Like you're like, oh, who am I today? Am I the sober Ryan? Am I the drunk, fun, confident Ryan? Like who am I, right? And it's exhausting, like having to actually use that bandwidth to think about it. My role as a hypnotherapist and a coach is essentially to get the human in front of me to get to a place of peace and inner peace. Like I think the word peace really, really summarizes everything that we want in life. Like who doesn't just want peace? Peace, the word
I agree.
actually like defines like just calmness and clarity and confidence and all of these things under one umbrella. So when someone experiences internal peace, I feel like they are just one and they are just whole, and they don't need to be this person or that person. Like they are them and that's it, regardless who they're in front of, whether they're in a business meeting, whether they're out with their mates in the pub, like they're them. Because it's in that duplicate life that people live, that's when it can be very draining. And then that's when it's like this vicious cycle of taking off the mask, putting it back on, thinking who you're showing up to be today. And then you might experience some form of self-hatred or resentment because you ended up doing something wrong, and then you got to turn for the drink. And it's just this constant cycle, right? So yeah, my job is essentially to take away all the masks and to just be you, basically.
That's really respectable. So you want people to get comfortable in their own skin and have peace, which are such important things if you want to be able to live a fulfilling life, which is something I had to do to, get where I am emotionally, mentally, physically today, because I was never comfortable in my own skin, kind of like you mentioned earlier. Like I was very insecure as a kid. I didn't really, I didn't really, I would say, like myself until later on in life, probably till I got sober. But it took a lot for me to overcome the negative thinking that I had towards myself because of uh, how I grew up, bullying, things like that, just overcoming some of those things to get confidence. Part of your responsibility is to help people be comfortable and find peace. Does it always include a peer sobriety, or is it a lot of it just them controlling their use and not doing it for the wrong reasons?
Yeah, I always meet the client in their world, right? So I never push sobriety onto a client. That's why I don't call myself a sobriety coach or anything like that. I don't even like the word addiction, to be honest. I'm really trying to find a different word to kind of summarize it. But I meet the client where they're at, right? So if they wanna, like, I've got a client, for example, that I've been working with. He came to me with a cocaine addiction. We beat the cocaine addiction, and then he mentioned to me, well, I'm kind of using drink a little bit to escape, blah, 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 blah. And his goal now is to not completely cut drink out, because he actually likes the ritual of buying a nice bottle of wine and having it with a steak and like once a week or whatever. That's cool, right? It's not the substance that's the issue. It's the relationship that one has to it. That's the problem. Because they use ketamine for therapy, they use MDMA for therapy, they use psilocybin for therapy, but I work with people that have a ketamine addiction. So that suggests to me that it's actually the relationship that one has to the substance rather than the substance itself. So if a client comes to me and says, look, I want to cut down from 20 beers a week to 2, I'll work with that. Cool. Because that's okay. I never, ever, ever push a client because of my own perceptions of what they should do or how they should be. It's always meeting them where they're at. But I will add a caveat to that as well. Like, I don't specifically just work with people in addiction too. I also work with people on the other side of it. So let's say you, for example, right? Like, if you came to me and you've beaten this addiction, but you've picked up another one, like I see you vaping, right? So maybe you cut the alcohol and then you pick up a vape or whatever, and then you want to tackle that. Like I said at the start, there's some form of emotional dysregulation that's happening within the body that makes someone latch on to all these different addictive vices and behaviors. So my job then is to, okay, they've tackled the hardest one that was having the biggest impact on their life, but maybe they want to tackle this one, or maybe they've seen this issue arise, or maybe they want to make sure that it really, really, really lasts the sobriety because they've done 3 months and then they fall back in, or maybe they've done 6 months and they keep getting pulled in. So it's not necessarily just for someone that's in the midst of it right now and they're in the trenches. It's also for people that maybe, like, I've worked with people that experience like a year sobriety, fall in, a year, fall in, a year, fall in, and they know that there's just something that keeps pulling them back in, whether that be the anniversary of someone's death or whatever. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because it's not always for people that are right in the midst of it too. It's also for people that maybe, like yourself, that maybe are a year sober or kind of however long you are now, and are potentially hit obstacles and roadblocks along the way in their sobriety journey in the past, and they don't want that to happen again, basically.
Yeah. So you kind of help people, guide them on how to encounter those obstacles if needed.
Correct. Yeah. Because there's a reason why these people, clients, etc., keep getting pulled into these addictive behaviors, right? Whether that be the vape, the drink, the drugs, the alcohol, the porn, whatever it is, there's a reason why this keeps happening. So my job is to essentially get to the bottom of it. And this is why because obviously I know we spoke about the AA meetings and stuff like that too. And this is why I feel like they're fantastic for support, etc. But the emotional discomfort that one experiences, you can't quite nail that in a group environment, right? That's where the one-to-one comes in, and it can potentially work alongside each other to go hand in hand to get that person to that end goal, you know?
Exactly. No, I know what you do is incredible. Do you ever have clients that don't have any desire to like change their lifestyle per se when it comes to their daily life, their use and all that, but they just want to change the reasoning behind it, behind why they're doing what they're doing? Or do they all want to just cut back?
Yeah. So do you mean that they don't want to change their lifestyle with their friends and stuff, but they want to reduce their intake? Is that what you mean?
I mean, maybe they want to change kind of how they approach life, even like they want to, even maintain the same intake, but have a different reasoning as to why they're doing it, as opposed to, say coming home and drinking for the wrong reasons. Say they still want to come home and enjoy their drinking like usual, but they want to make sure they're not doing it to fill a void or to mask something.
Yeah. I mean, usually when someone starts their journey, they usually understand that actually the substance or the alcohol or whatever it was isn't actually the thing they enjoy. The thing that they enjoy is the thing that it gives them, i.e. the escape from the discomfort or whatever it is, right? So when they then experience that escape from the discomfort, but in a positive sense with the emotional work that I do as a hypnotherapist, and they don't experience that discomfort anymore, they actually tend to find that they don't actually need the wine or the beer or whatever, because they were just kind of excusing the behavior, right? So yeah, I've never worked with someone that came to me drinking 3 times a night, for example. We worked through the discomfort or whatever they were experiencing and then still carried on, because the substance itself isn't the issue. It's why they do it. And if they're having 3, 4, 5 drinks a night, it's probably not for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So with clients, is there a common theme that you notice that needs to be worked on a regular basis with most clients, referring to, say, self-confidence, saying to stress at work or having too much on their plate at the time? Is there a common theme amongst people you work with?
Yeah, well, the first phase is the subconscious reprogramming system of my program. And this is essentially unpacking the root causes of the addiction. And in this first phase, the root causes tend to be some form of emotional discomfort, right? Whether that be childhood experiences, whether that be stresses in work, whether that be low of confidence, like there does tend to be a theme, which is obviously the discomfort that one is experiencing. If we then break it down even further and see like, right, okay, what's most of the common themes, it will be some form of identity. So for example, low self-worth or lack of confidence or I'm not good enough or some identity level answer. Helplessness is also a very big one where someone has experienced abandonment in their childhood or something and they turn to the substances to kind of fill that void. But yeah, I've also worked with people that are like addicted to making money too. And it all comes back to this lack of self-worth or this identity that they're carrying around. That X will make them feel Y.
So even being a workaholic or addicted to making money and finer things, things like that can be considered like an addiction that really needs to be worked on where it roots from.
Yeah, I've recently worked with a guy who lives in Glasgow. And he owns a six-figure plumbing company, which is a multi-six-figure plumbing company. And he came to me because he was working 16-hour days. He just couldn't switch off. And every day, he'd look at his bank account, he'd look at his money, he'd look at his invoices, and it would fill this void. It would make him happy or confident or any of that. And I won't go into too much detail, but it essentially came from his childhood and it was low self-worth in a nutshell. So these big numbers, he wanted to prove a point to the people in school, right? And he then chased these numbers, not because he wanted to, because he felt like he had to. And he was filling this void that he had within him. And it was only when we did the work that he understood that actually he is confident, and we unpacked this low self-worth and shifted it into confidence essentially through the hypnotherapy. And we then moved on to the coaching, right? Because that's where I'm very different. I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. I've got therapy skills, but I actually do more than therapy. So we did clear the emotional baggage with the hypnotherapy, but then we moved into the coaching and we moved into the reducing his working hours, the work phone, putting boundaries in, like creating SOPs with his team. What else did we do? Optimized his weekly structure so he could get more done in less time. And now he works 4 hours a day and his business has actually moved into a 7-figure business. But it's not because he's working more, because he's working a quarter of the time. The fact is that he's not chasing this money. He's not clinching onto it with everything that he's got. There's something called detachment theory, where you let go. And it's like you go to a zoo, right? And you run after this butterfly, but the butterfly just flies away. But when you can stand there and you just have your arm out, the butterfly tends to just fall on your hand. And that's what happens with the things that we chase and latch onto. When you chase and latch onto something, it runs further and further away. But when you can actually stand there and metaphorically have your hand out, things come to you. And that's what happened to him. And he's now not attached to this financial revenue because he's got everything that he needs within him. That's just now an added bonus.
That's beautifully said. No, the butterfly analogy is amazing. That's great. Can you, just for the sake of listeners, can you explain how you attain your clients, kind of how people can find you if they would be interested in working with you, and just kind of give a little overview about what you do as a whole?
Yeah, of course. So I've got a simple 3-step framework, right? And you can find it on my YouTube. Ryan, I'll send you the link if you like, so you can pop it below. But it's a 3-step framework that I take my clients through to break free from any addiction, right? And it's essentially the 3 phases. The first phase is the subconscious reprogramming system. Like I said in the podcast, this is all about rewiring the subconscious mind. This is about doing the hypnotherapy so the emotional discomfort that one experiences is cleared instead of carrying around and latching onto other addictive vices too. So I've worked with clients that stop alcohol and pick up caffeine and sugar addictions and other things as well. And it's only until they do the inner emotional work that the other addictions fade away and they're actually living life contently. So that's the first phase in a nutshell. The second phase is the mindful living system. So this is all about incorporating healthy habits. And this is where the coaching side comes into it, right? This isn't now just about the therapy. We've done the emotional content. That's cool. This is now essentially, like I mentioned about that client, this is about optimizing your weekly structure so you can work towards your goals. This is about setting boundaries with family, loved ones, understanding like what are your drainers in your life, what are your energizers in your life, and how can you take more drainers away, how can you add more energizers, where's the potential areas in your life that you may slip up and potentially relapse, and all of these little aren't covered in the first phase, because the first phase is all the emotional content. This is then the kind of coaching aspect of things. So that's the second phase. And then the third phase is the future vision blueprint. So this is all about designing and creating a life of your dreams, right? Because in the midst of an addiction, you can lose sight of where you're going. And every day can just feel very monotonous and very samey, right? So the future vision blueprint is all about creating and handcrafting a document and a blueprint. So you know exactly what is the life that you want to live and how you're going to get there. Because I get a 3-year vision and then I reverse engineer that into a 90-day sprint. So with every single client, I've got a 90-day coaching brief and they tell me that they want to achieve bang, bang, bang. I pull that up and I make sure that I'm working towards that whenever we're coaching. And that's where it's very, very, very different from therapy. So yeah, that's essentially what I do in a nutshell, really, mate.
Oh, that's amazing. So you kind of have an individual plan for every person you work with, and it's usually a 90-day goal that they set, and gradually you just make progress towards that goal every time.
Correct. Yeah. And
that is really cool.
In some cases, if someone hits their 90-day goal in 30 days, we'll pull up the coaching brief again and we'll reassess and we'll go again. I'm working with a guy at the moment that wanted to gain a promotion in the 90 days. He's gained 2. He's signed $1 million contract and now we're resetting his goals and we're moving again. So yeah, it's very bespoke to every individual. And this is why, but like being bespoke is so important. You see so many generic coaches just following the same kind of scripted blueprint, like client after client after client, but it just doesn't stick because everyone's different. Every single human is different and everyone sees the world differently. And everyone needs different coaching and therapy approaches too.
Do you work with mostly people remotely and in person, or is it a combination of both? Or
yeah, it's a combination of both. It depends where I am in the world, to be honest. I mean, I tend to travel around a fair bit. So wherever I am in the world, if someone obviously wants to do in person, that's cool. I met my client from Dubai in London last week and we did an in-person session and shot a pod and stuff like that. So that was cool. But yeah, it's mainly remotely because I like to pack my laptop up and travel around too. So yeah, but if they are for whatever reason in the UK or wherever I am in the world, then obviously they can do that too.
It's great. So you are willing to travel and be with them, but if it's convenient for both of you, you are willing to work remotely, sort of online like we are right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'd prefer in person, to be honest. I'm really trying to push the in-person connection. So how it works is obviously I sign up the client on a remote basis, but then if for whatever reason we want to try and do an in-person session, then obviously we'll try and make that work. But I don't sell it as an in-person coaching because it's more remote with the opportunity to do in person if it kind of aligns.
So what is your podcast about as well?
Yeah, so it's all about addiction. It's the High Functioning Addiction podcast. I get clients and experts in different fields on there and just kind of chat with them, really. Most of it is previous clients, but there's also some experts like my yoga teacher, meditation teachers. I've got a sound healer on there. I've got an online fitness coach. There's so many different people that I've got in there, essentially sharing their journey with addiction, but then how their experience and their skills can also help with addiction too, because I am aware that coaching and therapy isn't the only answer. there is obviously also other modalities too. So I like to create kind of holistic approach with that.
Great. Okay. I'll have to go into your podcast, watch some more episodes. So
Yeah,
I'm
do it.
very interested. So just a couple last things. Could you kind of just talk about what different of a person you are today, and what advice would you give to somebody struggling right now, whether it be down at a rock bottom in addiction or even a functioning addict? What kind of advice would you give to them?
It's super, super simple and super short is reach out to someone that can help. Like it really is. I could go off into so many different tangents and do this and do that, but the number one thing that anyone can do, no matter if it's a friend, a family, a therapist, I don't know, a yoga teacher, whoever, just go and reach out, because that is the number one thing that you can do to change your life. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And it's such an easy to send a message, but it's so hard to press send, and we need more people press and send.
Very good answer. The only way to change is to be outspoken that you want to change. It's very good. So I like to end every episode with a quote. Is there a quote that stands out that you can think of right now that you live by or that you would like to share?
Yeah, there's one by Viktor Frankl, the guy who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and it's super simple, and it's he who has a purpose can almost bear anyhow. And it's so true. Like when you have a purpose and you have a meaning and you're working towards something, you can bear any obstacle. It's when you don't have something bigger than you that you're working towards, that's when life can get heavy.
Beautifully said. No, I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we close up?
No, not at all. I just want to say thanks for having me. I probably am a bit different to most guests that you have on here, but I like to share a refreshing approach to
exactly
addiction.
I wouldn't say different. I would say a new perspective and a refreshing perspective, and that's what I want on the show. So it's very fulfilling. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you, bro. Thanks for having me, mate.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.